I'm Yumi.
I'm Tracy.
So today we're going to talk about something very important. So every year, college admissions changes, right? So today we're going to talk about the recent trends from 2024 to 2025. So we see a lot of students all over the world, right? Although we see predominantly Asian and Korean or Chinese students, we do think this is a very significant trend that we want to share with you all. So hopefully this video is very helpful to you guys. So we're going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses. So when we see students who had very successful results, we see several strengths, right? So number one is obviously like GPA-wise, what were these trends? So a very unique trend that we saw this year was that unweighted GPA was very important. So if you have an unweighted GPA of 3.8 or higher, that was generally expected in all the top 30 schools. So why do you think it's unweighted GPA?
It's because unweighted means it doesn't take into account your AP classes. So what it means is actually students with B grades in APs or honor courses didn't perform as well, regardless of its rigor. So what it actually means that you'll be better off not taking AP courses if you're going to be getting a B or lower.
Yeah. And that's different than our previous year trends where you're like, oh, the rigor is very important. So when they ask, hey, should I take AP this or honors that? We would say in the past, like, oh, AP, if you can get at least like a B and B+. But then now it's like, okay, that's probably a risky move because the colleges are looking at just like the number of Bs you're having. So academic consistency, your grades consistency is a lot more important than the rigor at this point. And there's a lot of reasons to this, obviously, but I feel like there's a lot of not only grade inflation, but also because people are getting a lot of Bs in AP and honors courses. So that unweighted GPA is just becoming a little bit more important.
Right. So you just want to make sure that you only take as many APs as, or you can, if you can get the A's classes.
So it's unfortunate. But if you ask us, like, should I take AP that, honors that, and I get a B in AP or A in honors, now it's take the honors, right? Yeah. But it's better to get an A in AP, right? So you should do that.
So the next one, we're going to talk about SAT. In terms of SAT, a lot of the colleges actually had them to be test optional up to this day, especially with the COVID-19 issue and all that. But we're getting more tests required for SAT. So we generally do say that the competitive scores actually begin around 1450, with 1500 and up ideal for the top 30 schools. And it would be for, like 1540 or above for the top 15s. We're talking about like IVs up to, the top colleges. What do you think about the correlation between SAT and GPA? Because they're all in the academic area. What do you think is important?
Yeah, so if you ask like what's more important, I feel like it's again consistency, right? Like in application, you're trying to really make them trust you that you can survive in their school, in their courses. So let's say your SAT is like really high. You're like you have a 1580 in SAT, but then your GPA is pretty low. Then it might show like, oh, maybe you are very, very smart because you got like this really high score in SAT, but your grades are low. So maybe you are not as diligent enough.
Right.
Maybe you slocked off and didn't really study for your exams, or you missed homework and things like that. So that's going to raise red flags. On the other hand, let's say you have a very high GPA, but you have a low SAT, which is actually more of the case that we see all the time. That means maybe your school has grades inflation. Maybe your classes are way too easy. Then it's going to raise, again, red flags, like, are you going to do well in our school? If you look at just both of them, I'd say GPA is still slightly more important because GPA is like all of it 4 years of high school, while SAT is just one shot. So it does have a different meaning, but again, consistency in terms of showing both high scores or at least similar scores, I think would be very important. And then third is extracurriculars. So this is always the hardest of them all, I feel like. And what a trend that we saw in the very strong applicants that we had was that fewer but highly distinctive and cohesive extracurricular list was a lot more important and had great results than those with long or unfocused lists. So that means, you have 10 spaces in your Common App to write your extracurriculars, but let's say you have all 10, but it's like a very short term or like it's just like
science here, and then you have like journalism or like newspaper editors or
just random stuff. Yeah, you're like you don't even have we can't see just from your list what your intended major is, what your passion is, what your story is. Then that having 10 lists and having like 4 years of experience in like leadership skills, that's really not gonna do a lot of benefits for you. Honestly, if you're really passionate about something, you will have actually very few extracurriculars, like 5 to 6, and you're like very deep into it. So just having like, I say you should still have a minimum 5, but a good number would be like 8-ish, 7-ish, if that's very deep. And let's say you do have 10, but it's like really, really great, then obviously go for it. But it doesn't mean you need to have all 10, because back in the days, everybody's like, you need to have 10. So let's split it with this like one-time volunteering activities. That's not really.
it'll just be a placeholder and it won't really mean anything. And the most important thing about extracurriculars, I point out like 3 things, you know, the leadership and how major related it is and how continuously have you been doing the activity. And I think this talks about how deeply interested you are as well, because if you're truly interested in something and if you want to major in that area, you're gonna have to be doing an activity for at least some certain of years if you're really interested. If you're interested in that area so deeply, you continue it for a long time, you're naturally gonna be put in a better position in terms of like leadership, let's say. Like you're gonna be better at it than somebody else, which tells about who you are as well.
And then I think we keep talking about like story and like cohesiveness. That's also, we call it branding. So like that thematic coherence is very important. So we learned that a lot in Brand Youth, where we try to really package what we have and find that purpose, that problem you want to solve, and show it through your activities. So having that clear hook or niche is very important in your extracurricular.
Right.
A very easy example that I say is like when you're applying for a job, like let's say I'm applying to be a writer, but in your resume you have nothing about writing. Then how are you gonna get a job? How are the people going to hire you? They can't. So it's the same thing. But then some people are like in the activities list, oh, I have this one journalism activity, so I can be journalism major. It's your entire list and your entire application. You can't say I have this one thing and that's my thing. That's not gonna work in terms of thousands of people who are applying.
And you know, admission officers are only going to be looking at your application for less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So they really want to see at firsthand what you've been doing throughout your high school years, and that will be shown through your activities list, and that will show your genuineness and your authenticness.
Speaking of authenticness, so if you have external, like additional stuff on your application, like additional resume when they didn't even ask for it, or like on your additional info section, you have like all of these things, like I won this Spanish class award and I got a school volunteer award, all of that. No one is going, yeah, right. Because that's not gonna help. Like you need to make their life easier by just providing what they're asking for. Don't offer more because there's a reason why they're not asking for it.
So focus on showing the admission officers how truly you are deeply interested in that subject area by not just saying that you're interested in some science and not have anything to show throughout your high school years.
It's not you're dating someone, you're like, I love you, I love you, I love you. But then when you don't even like buy them food, buy them gift or anything.
Your actions are gonna actually show him how much you love him.
You need to show that.
Let's talk about majors now. So there were higher acceptance rates observed in last year's trend. Less competitive STEM fields, for example, environmental science, material science, or cognitive science. And then in terms of social sciences or humanities, for example, art history and sociology and anthropology.
Yeah, and major strategy is the most important at this point because colleges want to diversify their class, and major is just a really big, significant factor in that diversity. It's just natural if everyone flocks to one field, then you're just gonna have limited spots. So trying to be very strategic and finding that less competitive, more seats available type of majors, and then possibly changing majors later or whatnot, if that's possible, it's a very good strategy. It's been like that for recent years, but even more so last year and probably this year too.
Choosing the right major will really affect you greatly in terms of your getting accepted to a school or not. And like I said, for the less competitive majors, if you want to go for STEM but you don't think you're as competitive, consider environmental science or material science or the ones I've said before. And then in terms of like sociology or anthropology, it's a very broad and traditional major is what we call it. So always go for the broad traditional majors first and then see if it fits your application.
Don't try to just choose art history just because for the sake of choosing one. Like if your application does not show it, then you can't choose it. So find the one that fits your story. So number 5 is essays. So successful essays were those that were obviously original, right? Like nothing cliche. Immigration story, great. Please don't write it. Anything that is personal to you, think about whether that's personal to all of these other people who are applying, because then it's probably not going to be like leaving a great impression. Like you're going to be kind of forgotten in the pool. Another really big thing I want to emphasize is humor. So not everyone is gonna be like laugh out loud funny, but what we always say is like, think of Friends, the comedy show, right? Every character there is different in terms of how funny they are, but that humor is the type of aspect you want to show on your application. You don't need to, again, make them LOL. You just have to be like, that kind of thing. That's like, that's funny. That's actually real fun. That's funny. Like that thing.
Like you, be like this.
And then something that's like deeply personal, like not like TMI kind of thing, because I've seen people write about a lot of things that I don't want to know, but then like something that's like deep about you. Also, it doesn't have to be like super like life-changing moment kind of deep, but like super personal. So I had a student write about Ria's didn't write about like nail biting and how he created a community of people who are biting nails and like all of these deeper messages. It sounds funny. And it actually shows a lot of character about who this person is and how he can turn these weaknesses into strengths. So obviously it needs to be done well, but those are very important factors. And obviously topic and message is a lot more important than writing. So students always care about like, I need to sound very eloquent and all of that. You're not Shakespeare. Please do not write like one because you're a teenager and they expect you to be one. Just try to really focus on the message. When we read it once, we should know the message. If you're trying to be like, this should be indirectly shown on this in this essay, right? Like we're just gonna be left with like, and then like move on. It's not gonna work, right? So just be very straightforward with what you're trying to say. And then number 6,
talking about personality fit. Actually, in terms of admissions, the more outgoing ones, the more approachable ones, and more social students actually resonated better with college admissions. Students who are also confident, yet very humble of themselves, outperform the overly self-promotional peers, which means that I think this can be readily shown through recommendation letters from teachers because they're the ones who are going to be directly interacting with you and really, feeling that vibe from you, how sociable you are, what kind of person you are, and that's going to be directly in their recommendation letters and how they describe you as a person. On the application, it's you trying to tell the admission officers about who you are. And you're gonna be, talking about all the good things about yourself. Your recommendation letter from a third person who will be your teacher or counselor, those will be the ones who will validate how good of a person you are or what kind of character you are. So be really friendly with your teachers and build good relationships so that they can actually validate you and confirm that you're a strong person.
Because you're not living life alone. They want to see how you can interact with other people. Otherwise, quickly going over number 7 and our last number 8. Number 7 is interviews. So unfortunately, I feel like a lot of colleges are not doing interviews nowadays. Like few colleges have stopped doing alumni interviews because they have very limited number of interviewers. And those who are living abroad just don't have a lot of access to interviews anyway. So I don't think that's going to factor into admissions as much anymore because there are so limited offers available. And then lastly, additional applications. So again, like don't send all of these like additional resume, whatever. Minimalism is the most effective. So just give them what they ask. Don't give them more than what they ask. So no URLs, no resumes, no extra all of this. Just it does not create any value. And then be genuine, right? Show who you are. Don't be fake, but be original. And then let's talk about weaknesses. So this is the fun part, obviously. And we're going to go over the same categories, but what we saw in more the weak applicants or those who did not have actually great results. So,
well, number one, GPA. So applicants with unweighted GPAs below 3.8 struggle to gain admission to the top 30 schools and even under the early decision process, in which for a lot of the schools, they have higher acceptance rates in early decision than the regular decision rounds. If your GPA is lower than 3.8, it's not gonna do really well in terms of your college admissions.
Yeah, and same reasons as we said about the strengths, because it doesn't really show that you are readily prepared to engage in their courses.
Right, and college is an academic institution, so they care most about the academic part.
Mm-hmm. And then number two is SAT. So if you don't submit scores, it is known in research and all of the data that it is better to submit a score. So even if it's test optional, you should submit a score, because those who did not, even those who are working with us, it did hurt them, their chances. So try to submit it as much as you can if you have those minimum scores. And let's say you're below the score. Don't ask us, I have a 1440, can I submit this score? Because we have to see your entire application. But regardless, the bar, we do have a standard. And if you're below it, you have to determine it.
Extracurricular activities. Projects lacking personal relevance, such as, like disconnected activities or patents, they were quite ineffective last year. And applications that are overly focused on community service across all ECs came off as insincere, meaning that you're trying to stick in everything to make it look good. That wouldn't show the admission officers that you're like genuinely interested in something. It'll just be shown off as, oh, she just tried to do every single thing that she could and racking up activities.
So maximizing your opportunities and just doing all of it for the sake of it is kind of different. And patents, I want to talk about how all of the students who have patents did not get into their dream colleges because, despite our recommendations of not to submit it, it's just a lot of the Asian students now do it for the sake of it. Yeah, although if you are a very, very top student with great extracurricular, great academics, I feel like that's maybe coming off as like too much or not as valuable for colleges anymore. It's not like set in stone, like this is like you're not going to get it if you get patent, but it's like a little trend that we saw. So like creating apps, creating all of that. If you do it really for the genuine sake of doing so and you have a purpose, great. But if not, it might not look so authentic. So you might have to explain a little bit more of that. And then going over the last few a bit more quickly, essays, again, like be original, but if you're rambling on like the resume style, I did this, I did that, or talking just about your achievements, that's probably not going to do well. And then when you're talking about school, like why you want to go to the school, you have to be very specific about why. Like if you can find something in just like a quick Google search, that's probably not going to be the best. And do not talk about why you want to live in New York City for NYU and Columbia, because so does everyone else. Research a bit more about what that is. In terms of personality, you don't want to be overly eager, like overly passionate. But again, I'm just going to emphasize like be genuine. That's it. And if you're not having a lot of self-awareness or you don't seem like you really understand other people, that's going to be a bit of a weakness on your application. I'm sure it's going to be a similar trend this year. So be careful about all of the aspects that we talked about in the weaknesses and try to care a lot about the strengths that we talked about in the strengths part. Otherwise, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, leave us a comment and we'll be sure to answer. So check out, we'll be back for a new video. Bye-bye.